When we talk about America's biggest strategic miscalculations, there's one that stands out more than the rest, and it's the way we underestimated India. For decades, the United States saw India as a distant democracy, big, chaotic, slow-moving, not as a strategic partner, but as an optional one. We treated India like a backup plan instead of a first choice. And in the world of geopolitics, backups cost you. America's foreign policy establishment was focused elsewhere: Europe, the Middle East, China. When we thought about Asia, we put all our chips on Beijing. We told ourselves that China would rise peacefully if we engaged with them, that they would become a responsible stakeholder in the international system. We were wrong. China used that opening to rewrite the rules, expand its military footprint, and challenge the very order we created after World War II. Meanwhile, India, the world's largest democracy, was right there, ready to be engaged. But we overlooked them. We underestimated their ambition, their capacity to grow, and their potential to be not just a regional power, but a global one. While Washington debated whether India was reliable enough, New Delhi was quietly building one of the most formidable military forces in Asia, securing its borders, modernizing its navy, and preparing to shape the Indo-Pacific for the next century. And let's be honest, we didn't just ignore India's strategic value, we underestimated its people. We saw 1 billion citizens and thought poverty. We saw a developing economy and thought weakness. What we should have seen was resilience, a nation that had survived colonial exploitation, partition, famine, and war, and still had the confidence to call itself the world's largest democracy. That kind of strength should have been a wake-up call. Instead, we let decades go by before we took India seriously. And while we were hesitating, China was building roads through the Himalayas, ports across the Indian Ocean, and alliances that made our so-called pivot to Asia look like an afterthought. By the time Washington realized India wasn't just another developing country, but the key to balancing Chinese power, the game had already changed. We paid for that hesitation. We paid in lost influence in the Indo-Pacific. We paid every time we had to scramble to respond to Chinese aggression from the South China Sea to the Taiwan Strait. Without a fully aligned India at our side, we paid in credibility, because when we finally came knocking, India remembered the years we kept them at arm's length. Let's not forget, India has always played the long game. They never begged for a seat at the table. They built their own table. And when they sit down, they bring not just their 1.4 billion citizens with them, but their history, their culture, their confidence, and their strategic independence. So when we talk about the price America paid for underestimating India, it's not just about military strategy or foreign policy memos. It's about the missed opportunity to shape the most consequential partnership of the 21st century before our rivals did. It's about the lost time we could have spent deepening trust, aligning visions, and setting the rules for a new world order together. And here's the truth, this isn't just history, this is a warning. Because in a world where China is more assertive, Russia is more aggressive, and the global order is more fragile, America can't afford to misread its allies again. We can't afford to look at a nation like India and see only what it was yesterday instead of what it's becoming tomorrow. The future of freedom in the Indo-Pacific, and I would argue the future of democracy itself, depends on whether America treats India not as a backup plan, but as a cornerstone. We cannot repeat the mistake of underestimating our most natural partner in the world's most critical region. The price we've already paid should be lesson enough. The next chapter must be about partnership, not hesitation. And if we get this right, history won't remember the years we lost. It will remember the moment we finally woke up. If ignoring India's strategic value was one mistake, underestimating its innovation power was another, and in some ways, even more costly. For years, America looked at India and saw a country that could provide cheap labor, outsource call centers, and write code. But what we failed to see was the deeper story, the rise of a nation that was about to become one of the world's great innovation engines. Think about it, decade after decade, Indian students flooded American universities. They excelled in engineering, science, math, and technology. They built companies, founded startups, and became CEOs of some of our most iconic firms. Microsoft, Google, IBM, we celebrated their individual success, but somehow we never asked ourselves the bigger question: what would happen if India turned that same brainpower inward? What would happen if the country that gave the world some of its most brilliant minds decided to build the next big breakthroughs at home? America missed the moment. We didn't invest deeply enough in joint research hubs, in co-developing technology that could have strengthened both our nations. Instead, we watched from a distance as India poured resources into its own innovation ecosystem. Today, India is not just coding software, it is building satellites, developing advanced AI models, producing vaccines for the world, and becoming a hub for clean energy solutions. And here's the kicker. While we hesitated, China didn't. Beijing poured money into emerging technologies and raced to control the future of 5G, semiconductors, and artificial intelligence. By the time Washington realized we were in a tech arms race, China had already set the pace. And India was standing right there, ready to collaborate, but America had been too slow to treat it as an equal partner in innovation. This isn't just about gadgets and apps. This is about the future balance of power. Whoever leads in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cybersecurity, that nation will write the rules for the next century. And every year that America failed to fully partner with India, we gave our competitors a head start. Let's talk about semiconductors for a moment. The chips that power everything from our phones to our fighter jets. For too long, we relied on supply chains that ran through volatile regions. We are now scrambling to bring semiconductor manufacturing closer to home. Imagine if we had seen India not just as a market for American chips, but as a co-creator, a place where we could have built manufacturing hubs together a decade ago. We would not be playing catch up now. And what about space technology? When India launched a spacecraft to the moon at a fraction of the cost of any other nation, the world was stunned. But we shouldn't have been. This is a country that has always believed in doing more with less, in finding solutions that are not just innovative but accessible. There was a time when that kind of thinking would have made India our most natural partner in driving affordable, scalable technology worldwide. Instead, we treated them as a secondary player. But here's what's so remarkable. India never stopped building, never stopped innovating, never stopped believing in its ability to be a global leader. And now, as we finally wake up to the reality of a fractured supply chain and a contested technological future, we are turning to India, not out of charity, not out of convenience, but out of necessity. Because here's the truth, no other democracy has the combination of talent, scale, and ambition that India brings to the table. No other country can match its ability to produce millions of engineers every year, to drive down the cost of cutting-edge technology, to make the future more secure and more inclusive. The lesson here is clear. America cannot afford to underestimate the next wave of Indian innovation. The world's biggest breakthroughs in energy, medicine, space, and AI will not just come from Silicon Valley, they will come from Bengaluru, Hyderabad, and Pune. And if we are wise, they will come from collaborations that combine American capital and Indian ingenuity, partnerships that make both our nations stronger. We missed the first chance to lead together. We cannot miss the second. If the 20th century belonged to those who built machines, the 21st century will belong to those who build ideas. And India is building them faster than ever. The future is not waiting. The question is, will we? For decades, when Washington looked at India's economy, we saw a market that was too complicated, too slow-moving, too bureaucratic. We told ourselves that India's growth was impressive, sure, but that it would take decades for it to matter on the global stage. And that miscalculation may have been one of the most expensive mistakes we ever made. Because while America was hesitating, India was transforming quietly, steadily, relentlessly. It was reforming its economy, modernizing its infrastructure, digitizing its payments, and building a middle class that is now bigger than the entire population of the United States. And while we were busy debating trade agreements, India was becoming the fastest growing major economy in the world. Think about that for a moment, a nation of 1.4 billion people, a nation with hundreds of millions of young, ambitious citizens entering the workforce every single year. That's not just a market. That's a once-in-a-century economic engine. And instead of putting ourselves at the center of that engine, America sat on the sidelines. Our companies saw the opportunity before our policymakers did. Silicon Valley invested, global brands rushed to get in, and India became one of the most important markets for tech, energy, and manufacturing. But Washington was slow. We hesitated on trade deals. We dragged our feet on market access, and we missed chance after chance to make the United States India's #1 economic partner. And as we hesitated, others filled the gap. Europe moved in. Russia struck energy deals. China built roads, ports, and railways under its Belt and Road Initiative. The same China that has been America's biggest strategic rival saw India as a crucial market, and it acted. This isn't just about dollars and cents. This is about leverage. Every trade agreement we delayed, every opportunity we ignored, we gave someone else the chance to shape India's economic future, and by extension, the global order. We gave up influence in one of the most dynamic regions in the world at a time when we needed it most, and the consequences aren't just measured in missed profits. They're measured in lost trust, because when India looked at America, it saw a partner who was quick to lecture but slow to deliver. It saw a nation that wanted access to its market but wasn't willing to meet halfway. And so India did what great nations do. It diversified. It built its own options. Today, India is not waiting for anyone's approval. It is negotiating trade on its own terms, deciding which partners get access and under what conditions. And if America wants to play a leading role in India's economic story, it's going to have to compete for it, just like everyone else. But here's the good news: we still have a chance. India's economic rise is not a moment, it's a movement. It is building new cities, new industries, new ways of connecting its people to opportunity. It is building the largest digital public infrastructure on the planet, giving millions of people access to banking, credit, and healthcare for the very first time. This is the kind of transformation that doesn't just lift India, it lifts the world. It creates new demand for American technology, energy, education, and ideas. It creates millions of new jobs, billions of new consumers, and trillions in new trade. But only if we are smart enough to show up. Only if we treat India as the partner it is, not the project we once thought it was. Because make no mistake, the future of the global economy is not being written in just New York, London, or Tokyo. It is being written in Mumbai, Bengaluru, and New Delhi. And if America wants to shape that future, it has to be at the table, not knocking on the door after the deals are already signed. We can no longer afford to underestimate the power of India's economic revolution. We can no longer afford to see it as a distant story that will take decades to matter. It is happening right now. It is rewriting the balance of power, and it is creating an opportunity for a stronger, fairer, more prosperous partnership between the world's two largest democracies. The choice is simple: lead with India or get left behind. And history is not kind to those who show up too late. The world has a way of waking us up when we've been asleep at the wheel. For years, America treated India as an afterthought, a partner we'd get to eventually, a relationship we'd deepen someday. Then came the shocks that changed everything. The Ukraine war upended global energy markets. China became more aggressive on its borders and in the South China Sea. Russia and China grew closer than ever. And suddenly, Washington realized that the future of stability, the future of democracy, might depend on whether India stood with us or stood alone. And here's what was so striking. India didn't wait to be told which side to choose. It didn't fall in line. It didn't become anyone's pawn. It made its own decisions based on its own interests. Some in Washington were surprised, even frustrated, that India didn't automatically adopt America's position on Ukraine or Russia or China. But that's the point. India isn't a junior partner. It is a sovereign power with its own vision of the world. And that was the wake-up call America needed. Because what we finally understood is that the 21st century will not be about building alliances of dependence. It will be about building alliances of equals, with nations that have the confidence and the strength to say no when they must, and yes when it truly matters. Look at the Indo-Pacific today. China is trying to rewrite the rules. It is militarizing islands, threatening Taiwan, and pressuring its neighbors. America cannot face that challenge alone, and we don't have to. India sits at the very center of the Indo-Pacific with one of the world's largest navies, one of the most capable militaries, and one of the most experienced diplomatic traditions on Earth. When Chinese troops clashed with Indian forces in the Himalayas, India stood firm. When the world questioned whether a democracy could be both strong and independent, India answered. And Washington finally saw the truth. India is not just another player. It is the balancing power in Asia. But let's be clear, trust is not built overnight. We cannot expect India to forget decades of being overlooked just because we now understand its importance. Partnership is earned, not assumed. And the good news is, we are starting to do the hard work. We are sharing intelligence. We are building joint defense projects. We are investing in infrastructure and clean energy together. We are creating a future where America and India can stand shoulder to shoulder, not because we have to, but because we choose to. And that is what makes this moment so powerful. The world is at a crossroads. Democracy is under pressure from every direction. Authoritarianism, disinformation, economic coercion. If we are going to preserve a free and open world, we need partners who believe in that vision, who are willing to defend it not just with words, but with action. India is one of those partners. And if we are wise enough, humble enough, and determined enough to build real trust, we can create the most consequential democratic partnership of this century. Together, we can shape the rules of trade, technology, security, and human rights for a generation. Together, we can show that democracy is not a relic of the past, but the blueprint for the future. This is bigger than geopolitics. This is about whether freedom or fear will define the world our children inherit. And if there's one thing America should have learned from the price we've already paid, it's this: we cannot afford to underestimate those who share our values, our aspirations, and our courage. We missed the first chance to lead with India when the cost was small. We cannot miss the second when the cost would be everything. This is the moment to choose partnership over hesitation, to build trust over time, and to stand with the one democracy capable of helping us secure a free and open world. Because if we fail, the future will be written by others. But if we succeed, if we finally recognize India for what it is and work as equals, then history will not just remember that America paid a heavy price. It will remember that we turned that price into the most valuable investment of the century,